it's an error. ED term not found. Item not found. And I have to restore it again. So I presume that will change when the show starts. So let me start the show. See what happens. Hello, gentlemen. Do we have sound and video? Hold on one second.
I hear an echo.
This is still an error. Okay. We have sound and we have vision. And there's only two guys in there. I mean, you're actually twice. Hold on. Gentlemen, just bear with me for a second. We're trying to take care of an issue. Just hold on. He's in. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Are we okay?
Okay. All right, sorry about that, gentlemen. Just had a little problem, and I think we took care of it. First off, I'd just like to tell everybody thank you for visiting the site today, and I think you're really going to enjoy this site with Mr. Alan Herman. And this is what the site is all about, is me trying to bring all these great technicians and great drummers to this site, explaining to you their approach and sharing with you their approach. And I have many, many different guests coming, and I've had other guests in the past. So we're going to continue this in addition to the lessons. Just a little briefing on Alan Herman before I give him the mic. Who he is and what he has done. All right. First off, he's a Juilliard School of Music graduate, and he was the man, the go-to man on Broadway for at least 20 years. He did all of Bob Fosse's shows, and he did Dancing, Pimpin', Jesus Christ Superstar, and he also has a few DVDs that are out. One he's working on right now with the great Billy Martin. So, actually, that's all I need to say at the moment, and we will take questions and answers. So, we'll give you some answers, but please, get some questions, and I'm going to turn you over now to Mr. Herman, And thank everybody very much for visiting the site again. So, Mr. Herman, it's all yours, sir.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Herman. And we're going to talk about technique today, which is what I do mainly. And I want everybody to think of this as a private lesson, each of you. I'm encouraging everybody to interact with me. I'm going to present some very new material, and you might have a particular question you want to ask me about it, because it's all going to be brand new. So it's all new to me. It's stuff that I've sort of discovered on my own recently, and it's changed a lot of what I do technically. But before I get to that, I'd like to bring everybody up to how I got to where I was before this happened. So I'm going to go through my whole teaching history. My first teacher was a wedding player. But the first really good instruction I got was actually third party when I was in high school. I was 15 years old. And the senior drummer was graduating that year, and he already auditioned and made Manhattan School the next year. So he was my idol at the time. He was 18, I was 15. And I wanted to be just like him. You know, I've been playing drums maybe 2 years at that point. So his name was Hank Byron. I don't think it's anybody would know at this point. But anyway, he was going to New York for drum lessons. We lived in Brooklyn. And he went to New York for drum lessons, and he went to the Henry Adler building, which was the place to go to study. And I think he studied with Charlie Tappan there. And so we were, all the drummers in the school were very anxious to see him when he got back from a lesson, to find out what he found out from Charlie and Henry Adler. And so he showed me the first technique I started using. I got some really good information. One of the first things that I got from him was a paradiddle table. And I didn't even know what it was. I mean, he showed it to me. It didn't have a name. It was written on a brown piece of paper, and Charlie gave it to him. And he showed it to us in our high school, and it became my favorite rudiment. I didn't even know it was a rudiment. I didn't know the rudiments at that point. I mean, I knew the paradiddle, I knew the single stroke, and the double stroke from my first teacher. But he was, like I said, he was a club date player. So he didn't have a broad knowledge of technique. But what Charlie showed Henry, and Henry came back to my high school and showed us, was this. I like to describe it as push-pull, but it's not the push-pull that everybody talks about now. You know, it's sort of like you push the stick down and you pull the stick up. And that was really, the technique was this. And I did this for a while. I did this for a couple of years. I did a lot of practicing this way. You know? Well, so I went back into Joe immediately. It's so ingrained in me to do that. So that wasn't very efficient, you know, because what's happening is I'm using tension on the way down, and I'm using tension on the way up. So I'm using a lot of energy, and I was getting tired, and with that much tension, I wasn't relaxing. I didn't have a chance to relax. There was no chance to relax. So I was creating a lot of tension on my playing. We're using squeeze tension for accents. We squeezed the stick for accents, so it was really painful. I was getting calluses and blisters from bleeding. Very proud of the blood stains on my snare drum. Very proud of that. So then I went to Joe Morello in my 20s. I was about 24. So this is high school to 24. That's what I was doing. And then Joe showed me this rebound method, which meant that you throw it down, tension down, but there's no tension up. You use the rebound of the stick to bring it back up, so it was only half as much effort. I only had to work going down, and that immediately added endurance, and it immediately added speed, because now I was able to rest between strokes instead of having to work between strokes to get in position. It would automatically go into position using the strength of the rebound, not my energy to bring it back into position to play again. So that was a tremendous help, and I did that for decades. I mean, I've been working on that since my mid-20s when I started studying with Joe Morello when he showed me this. And I continued to see him consistently throughout my career. Not every week for years. I mean, I saw him for a long period of time in the beginning to sort of get indoctrinated with the technique to where I could be trusted to work on my own a little bit. And then he sort of cut me loose, and I would come back every so often for new material when I finally got through the material he gave me. I mean, after a while, he would give me so much material, it would take me 6, 7 hours to go through all. I couldn't get through the lesson. So I started going once a month, and then once every other month. And then it started to get into, every couple of years I would check in with him and do that. Now, I've been working on my own recently, out of necessity. And I've done some investigations. I mean, I got into slow practicing. It's really where this began. I was concentrating on slow practice, so I would slow the metronome down and try to play slower tempos and spend more time. I did a video on this on YouTube about practicing slowly. That was sort of the beginning of it. But that's only half the story. The tempo could be slow, but I was still throwing the stick fast because that was what I had learned. Okay, so the idea is, if you throw it down slow, it comes back slow. If you throw it down fast, it comes back fast. It makes a bigger sound. So my thinking, the way I took this was that meant, well, then I needed to learn how to throw it as fast as possible. Because that would get me, I would be able to play faster, I'd be able to play louder, because I'd be get more velocity, the old energy equals mass times velocity. So if you increase the velocity, you get more power out of the thing with not as much energy. So I would get the position faster for the next stroke, so I could play faster and I could play louder. And so that's what I spent a long time, decades, developing, throwing a very fast stroke and letting it come back. Now you have to understand that involves tension. I mean, everything we do involves tension. I did a video on tension too for YouTube, and tension is what we rely on in our musculature. I mean, that's how our muscles work. We have two. In this particular case, like for your wrist, for instance, you have two sets of muscles. You got a set of muscles on this side, and you got a set of muscles on this side, and they can only contract. So if you want to throw your hand down, you got to contract these muscles, and that's what causes the tension. The contraction of the muscles creates tension. And the more the faster you want to move, the quicker you want to contract, the more energy you use, the more tension you create. So the louder you play, or the faster you play, the more tension you're generating. Now the muscle needs to relax. It has to, in order to do another stroke, it needs to relax so it can contract again. It can't contract by itself. So we lift the stick up, or the stick lifts us up and stretches the muscles out again, so then we can recontract them. Okay? So we have these muscle contractions creating, and I'm trying to do the quickest contraction I can make in order to attain the acceleration of the formula to increase the speed of my wrist so that I can get more power out of the impact, and I can be in position to play the next stroke quicker and all. So that was 20 years I spent doing that. Then I got into the slow thing, which is the opposite end of the spectrum. And like I said, I was slowing the metronome down, but I was still throwing it fast. See, what happens in this technique, I started looking at it in stages. Physically, we go through stages physically. It changes depending on how fast we have to play or how high we have to play. We do different things with our hands. The first thing we learn is the throw-catch thing. Is you throw it down and you catch it. And you let it come back. Now, that's fine. That's stage one, is I'm throwing one stroke. I'm playing one stroke. Now, what happens is that when you speed this up, you get to the point where there's not enough space. I'm not stopping. I'm not catching anymore. It's just throw. No throw catch anymore. No, none of that. So that's a stage two, and that's a continuous motion. And that's really what I want to develop, that continuous motion, that flow, continuous flowing motion, because it's a lot more efficient. I don't have to initiate every stroke, which I don't need to start from a standstill. The momentum of the stick and the rebound and the whole thing is, sort of like riding a bicycle. You get up and you got to pump the bike, but after it's moving, you don't have to pump it so much because it has its own momentum going. I'm trying to do the same thing here. So then I thought about, so I didn't think about this yet, but I was thinking about throwing this as fast as I can so that I can get the fastest tempo I can and avoid the continuous, to try to keep it separated. Because the faster I could throw it, the further the separation can withstand the accelerando of the metronome. Higher up in the metronome I can get and still keep it separated, the faster my wrist can move. Even at the slow tempos, I was throwing it as fast as I can and using a lot of tension to generate that speed going down. But I went a step further. I said, well, maybe it's more than just a slow tempo, because what about slowly throwing the stick? Instead of trying to throw it quickly, as fast as I can, what about throwing it as slow as I can? And instead of throwing and catching, to try to get zen about it, to be one with the stick, so that I'm traveling with the stick. It's part of my hand. The stick and my hand are one, and I'm following it down, and I'm following it. Because that's what happens when you're, when you're doing that, and if I filmed that and then and slowed it down into slow motion, you wouldn't be seeing this in slow motion. You'd be seeing this, which looks like the Henry Adler method, which is why I guess he got the sense of doing this, because he must have looked at a drummer doing a single stroke of slow motion and said, oh, that's what's going on. But it's not really, if you're rebounding, it changes. So I can separate it by throwing quickly, or I can relax and use less energy. I get less sound. It doesn't come back as quickly, but I don't need to come back that quickly to make the next stroke, because I'm working with a very slow tempo. So instead of trying to extend my metronomic acceleration to the highest point with a separated technique, separating each stroke as quickly as possible, I took the reverse attitude, say, well, let me see how slow I can throw it, which means that I'm going to reach that continuous motion at the earliest accelerated metronome mark instead of the latest one. So instead of starting to go into that at 120, I can hit it at 80. And then I can work on that continuous motion very slowly, where I can learn to follow the stick. And also, I'm not using as much. I don't need to play every stroke on the drum in triple forte, unless I was a metal player. I guess they would do that, but I don't want to play like that. I want to play, piano, mezzo piano, forte, double forte, triple piano. I want to do all of that, So it occurred to me while I was thinking about this: throw slow and follow the stick as if it's in slow motion. It reminded me of something in my younger years when I was in a rock and roll band, and one of the hippies with a long beard used to get up early in the morning, which is unusual for a rock band to get up, because we used to go to sleep at 6 o'clock after breakfast. But anyway, he would get up first thing in the day, and he'd be out, we'd be on the road, and I'd see him out in the parking lot in a Holiday Inn or something, and he'd be doing this crazy motion. And I asked him about it, and he called it Tai Chi. I don't know if you know what Tai Chi is, but Tai Chi basically is an ancient Chinese discipline of self-defense. And the motion, what I was doing, the slow motion thing I was doing, reminded me of what my friend was doing every morning, doing Tai Chi. It was sort of like, so what is it, what is it that was similar about this slow motion? Why did they find it advantageous to work slowly? Because I was considering working this way, and I was looking for a reason why to do it. Instinctually I was doing it anyway, but I was looking for a reason. I need to do that. I need to find, you got to give me a reason. Otherwise, I really don't like doing things. You know, so I started studying Tai Chi. I don't mean I went to learn Tai Chi. I mean, that's what, I know a couple of drummers that got into martial arts discipline because they felt that it would help their technique. You know, and I always thought, you know, it was a power thing, and they would learn to hit harder, you know, if they learned karate. And I didn't really understand martial arts enough. You know, there's different kinds of martial arts. Tai Chi is a passive defense, where the idea is to use the least amount of energy to do and to do the least amount of damage. You know, there's other martial arts where you do the least amount of energy with the most amount of damage. You know, but they want to generate the most power possible out of the least amount of energy, but they're using the power to disable the attack, not to strike and hit and hurt. You know, so it's a different kind of approach. So I didn't want to study the Tai Chi. It would take me 6 months, a year, you know, about 10 years to become a master and really understand what it is that they're doing. And then hopefully that was going to trickle down, you know, filter itself into my playing subconsciously from learning this discipline. And I didn't want to do it that way. You know, I took a different method. I wanted to learn what it was that they were doing, using science. I was going to use my science background and try to understand the principles that their discipline was based on, to see if I could understand scientifically what it was, and then I would have a chance at applying that science to what I'm doing directly. And I spoke to a chiropractic pain specialist who specializes in efficient movement, and who is also familiar with Tai Chi, and he agreed with me, and he said that it was totally possible to understand what the principles were and apply them to something else without having to learn to be a Tai Chi master. So that's what I did. So I want to share with you. God bless you. What today's lesson is I want to share with you what I learned about Tai Chi and how I've applied that to my daily practicing, because it's changed my outlook. Right. So one of the things that immediately the first thing that I learned was they're using rotational motion, which led me to learn through my movement specialists that every motion we make, our body is capable of doing. Moving your pinky or your ankle, or everything we do is a rotation motion, which is the opposite of what I was teaching. I was teaching straight up and down. You throw the ball down, and the ball comes back straight up the way it came down, and that's true with a basketball, or when you throw a softball, because you're talking about linear motion. And I was using the physical dynamics of linear motion to define my technique, and thinking of it as an up and down. What I realized is that we're talking about circular motion, because that's the way our body moves, you know, and that's the way the stick wants to move. When you throw it down, you're at a pivot point, you know, and throwing the stick at the pivot point, which is the center of the circle. We just don't see the whole circle because you only see 90 degrees of it. But if we wouldn't stop the stick and we were in a vacuum in space, and we threw the stick down perfectly, it should spin in place in a circle, because that's what it wants to do naturally, especially if you're at the balance point, which is what we do when we use a rebound technique. We try to get the balance point. What the balance point does is make the revolution equal in weight and mass on either side, so it gets a very smooth, natural turn. If it wasn't in the balance point, then the turn gets a little lopsided. It gets pulls, you know, on the way down. Gravity adds momentum to it, to the weight, and then gravity is fighting it on the way up, so it's faster going down and slower going up, you know. But we have a better chance at getting a smooth up and down if we're at least in the balance point of the stick, or in the center of the mass, you know. So the stick is doing a rotational motion. and I'm thinking of it up and down. I'm doing an up and down, so I'm fighting what the stick wants to do. I'm not one with the stick, you know, and that's why I'm losing the stick. My hand's going straight, and the stick is going curved. So I really don't understand it. Now, the left hand is naturally a rotational motion, and that's the way it was taught, that the left hand is a rotation, and the right hand is a flip up and down, you know, this way. But it's really, it's two different kinds of rotations. And what's happening is this is a rotation because it's rotating around the center. It's the center here, where this is rotating from one side. You know, what does that mean? All right, I have to explain to you what the difference is now between the Newton linear or translational motion, and then what the difference makes when you talk about rotational motion. It has to do with the mass or the weight of the stick, which is part of the formula, you know. But the other thing we can do besides add speed to the power formula is we can add mass. So there's a difference in a way that mass works in a rotational system as opposed to a translational or direct linear straight motion. In a straight motion, the whole mass moves at one direction, at one speed, in the same time. Everything gets there in the same time. Rotational motion is different. The position of the mass generates different amounts of inertia or acceleration. I'll explain that to you if we can get an overhead shot on the camera. You can see the pad because I'm gonna explain rotational dynamics to you now. So you have to understand that the pivot point or the balance point of the stick is or the fulcrum, whatever you want to call it, is really the axis of the rotation, right? So if we look at the full rotation, the axis point would be in the center, right there, right? So if the amount of mass depends on the speed it's moving, so the same mass moving at different speeds will have different amounts of inertia or different amounts of momentum, all right? So the further away we get from the center here, the more translational motion, because now it's all fully 100% rotational in the center. You don't go anywhere when you're rotating on the axis. You just go rotate in the same position. As you get away from the axis, the rotation causes a circle that's wider than the axis itself, and the further away you get, the wider the orbit of the circle, and the more distance that the mass has to travel, which means if it's going to be traveling at the same time, it has to move fast. So it's moving faster at this point. The mass is moving faster here in a circular turn than it is here. It's moving fastest at the end. So the amount of inertia generated depends on where the mass is. You know, so if your mass is all at one end, it's going to create a lot of inertia, right? Whereas the more of the mass is in the center of the rotation, the less inertia it's going to cause, and the more conservation of momentum is going to happen. What that means is that the energy that it would have taken to move this, the inertia, it's hard to move it fast because it has a lot of mass, has a lot of inertia. If you reduce the inertia, it doesn't take as much energy to move it, which means now you can accelerate faster. So if your weight is balanced and condensed in the center of the rotation, then you should be able to move faster because you don't have to work against so much inertia. However, the opposite is true if you want a power stroke. Then then it actually works with you to have all the momentum at the end because now you're generating a tremendous amount of inertia. It's gonna hit really hard rather than fast. But if you hit it fast, it'll also sound hard. It's the same energy. One comes out with a lot of inertia. The other one comes out with a lot of speed. And I talk about this a lot. That if it's all the same energy, we can express it as speed, or we can express it as power. And this rotational energy is an example of that, depending on where your mass is. All right. So that's what I don't like about the right hand, is that if you think about it up and down, and your turning point is in your wrist. Or out here, for instance, was where it was, where my fulcrum was. You know, trying to go up and down. What I realized is that the center of my mass is here, and my fulcrum is here. So they're not in line with one another. And then I realized that there's two fulcrums, and there's two masses. What is good for the stick is also good for our body, on our hands. You know, we have mass. You know, and we want the turn not to be up and down. We want it to be circular as much as we can. It's a little unnatural in this way. That's why the old Moeller thing is actually more correct, because he used to turn it this way, which is more like the left hand, which is more of a rotational with the stuff in the center, rather than from here, where you have the weight on one side, which creates a lot of momentum. So this is a more powerful grip, but this is more efficient physically. So instead of thinking up and down, I started thinking of using this as a rotation. And then I had to start thinking differently about my fulcrum. The fulcrum wasn't a position on the stick, and it wasn't a particular position in my hand. It could float. The fulcrum should be, as much as possible, in the center of the mass you're using. And the mass can change. If I'm using more fingers than wrist, I may want to use an index finger fulcrum, you know, because I'm not using the full mass of my hand and wrist. And, you know, if I'm doing high power strokes and I'm using full hand, then my fulcrum's going to come back into the middle of my middle of my fist. So we have a balance point and a fulcrum, and the fulcrum could be anywhere on the stick, right? It's just the access point of the rotation. Now, depending on whether you use the balance point or not, if you have all the weight unbalanced on one side, you're going to get a lot of momentum, but it's going to be a very lopsided rotation. The stroke is going to be lopsided. Or you can try to get into the center of the mass, which will give you a control over a smaller height, working faster. Okay? So the way I'm thinking about it now is that it's an imaginary position in the middle of the mass of the stick. Now, I have an imaginary center of the mass of my hand as well. So what I want to do is I want to get these two axes in the same place. I want the center of my mass of my hand and the center of the mass of the stick to be the same access point of turn, which then I can take a look at the stick in my hand as being one mass. It's moving as one unit. It's being one with the stick. So I'm turning now, not using fingers. I'm just rotating my hand around the center of my mass, which is containing the center of the mass of the stick, which is in its balance point, and I'm rotating from the same access point from my hand. Everything is in balance. It's like riding a bicycle. I'm in balance. I'm in the balance point of my mass, including the stick and including my body that's moving with the stick, so that I learn how to work with the stick. So that was the first thing. So it changed my fulcrum, the rotational dynamics, changed my physics. It made me have a better understanding of how my body works, and how mass is different depending on its position in the rotation. It's not just translational, it's simple. It just goes in one direction, you don't have to worry about it. It's all the same speed. Now it depends on how I hold the stick, where my center of rotation is, how close it is to the center of my mass, or in terms of smoothness of stroke. You know, another thing was the reason for the slow motion. I think, I'm not quite sure, but the concept that I connect with this is that they're not using acceleration. You know, they're not trying to, you know, when you're doing boxing, the quicker you throw the punch, of course, the more power is going to be in that punch, the faster you go. So you learn to throw your punches short and quick. You don't wind up from back here because you're telegraphing, and also, you know, you waste a lot of energy setting up your punch when you just really want as much speed as possible. Muhammad Ali was great at this. What did he do to Liston? Nobody even saw the punch. He said it was, you know, like a 6-inch punch, and he knocked Sonny Liston out. You know, some people don't believe it. I think it's possible if you can move your hand fast enough to have that kind of impact. You know, is it possible to move your hand that fast? I don't know. So anyway, they were using momentum, which momentum works best when it's slowly. So momentum doesn't mean velocity impact. It's a slow movement of mass, of inertia. So like a train. It weighs a lot. It takes a lot to get the train moving, and doesn't have to move very fast, and it's going to be hard to stop it. But at 5 miles an hour, if you hit something, it's not going to have to. You're not going to make a lot of damage because it's not. Doesn't have a lot of kinetic energy because there's no acceleration involved. Now, if that train moving at 90 miles an hour can do a lot of damage because there's a lot more energy involved, and it's accelerated energy. It's because of the acceleration. The momentum is really felt when you're moving slowly, and then there's very little kinetic accelerated energy. You know, so if I throw the stick slowly, I get a chance to feel how much momentum I'm generating. Momentum is very strange because if you throw with tension and with a lot of energy, more energy than you need to return the stick back, the ratio of energy to momentum just overrides any momentum that's there. You don't even feel the momentum. You're not using it. You're not taking advantage of it. You're using all your own energy. Whereas if I throw slowly, it allows me to see how much momentum I have. And then if I want to speed up, I can just add the amount of speed I need to make the stroke, execute the stroke. And I'm using a minimum amount of my own energy and a maximum amount of momentum, which is aided by the gravity on the way down.
Yeah, Alan. Can you explain or demonstrate that with the full stroke?
Yeah. So I can throw it. If I throw it very, very slowly, it'll go down by itself, and it'll speed up because the gravity is going to pull it down. So I have to throw it a little faster to get it smoothly. So that I'm throwing at least as much power that gravity is pulling on me, so I stay with the stick. Because if I don't go as fast as gravity, the gravity will pull the stick away from me. So I can't go slow motion slow. I have to go fast enough to get a bounce, to get it to respond, to come back up. That minimal amount of energy. I don't need this. This is 10 times more energy than I need. It bypasses any momentum and gravity action on the way down that I might need. On the way up, the rebound energy pulls the stick up. Gravity's working against me. It starts to slow it down, and the opposite. But if I give it enough energy on the way down to match the gravity, on the way back up, it should have enough energy to get back up to where I started from. I can do more, and then it'll go a lot further back, but I don't want to go back further than I have to. I just want to use enough energy to make my stroke, as opposed to I'm using much more energy than I need to do when I'm playing. I'm not saying that you don't do that when you play. When you want to play loud, you have to throw the stick fast. But you don't want to practice triple forte only. You don't want to spend 2 hours playing, you don't want to spend a set playing triple forte only, So you need to be able to control the speed at slow speeds and fast speed. You can use it as fast speed or a slow speed. But if you don't work slowly, you have no sensitivity to how much rebound you're getting, how much momentum are you creating, how much is gravity helping you. So after a while, I'm not using much energy at all. So I'm using gravity and rebound with a minimal amount of initiated energy from myself. If I want to play loud, I can, but I don't need to practice that way for 3 hours. I don't need to practice that way at all. When I get faster, as I get faster, the tempo is going to force me to move my hand faster in order to make that traversal in the same amount of space. It's going to force me to throw the stick faster, and it's going to make me practice throwing my stick quickly, but only when I need to, when I need that kind of speed, and I get up there. if I spend all my energy at the slow tempos doing that, by the time I need it, where I need that much just to make the stroke, I don't got it anymore. I used it all up when I didn't need it in the beginning. So it's a way of using just the amount of energy you need. So I lessen the amount of tension I'm using on the way down. Not only so again, back to the history, tension down, tension up. I went to Joe, and he said, oh, no tension up, fine. So now the only thing that's left is to work on the amount of tension on the way down, because that's the only tension that's left. I can't eliminate the tension 100%, but I can manage it. And if I can manage it at a reasonable level, I'm not going to get tired. And I can use the energy for speed when I want it, or I can use it for power when I want it for power. But I have to learn how to use what's there. And the only way to find that out is to let it go and see what's there without using my own energy stepping on it. You know, so that's my new method. And I've been practicing slowly, stroking slowly, and it's really helped me. It's made me much more relaxed, even at fast tempos. It's increased my speed range because I'm more relaxed. And my endurance level has exploded. I mean, I used to have endurance problems at certain tempos. After you know, a certain 5 minutes or 7 minutes. Now, if I get into the groove, you know, and I'm meditating about it and totally relaxed, but I can go much longer without practicing. It's just relaxing. The more I relax, the more endurance I can get, and the more speed I can get, and the more speed I can get, the more power I can get. So it all feels. It's very unintuitive because it's not about throwing it fast. It's about throwing it slow, and because I'm throwing it slow, I'm getting faster. So then I started thinking about, yeah, well, I remember when I was in school. I mean, I remember the trumpet players, man, when they wanted to be lead trumpet players. They wanted to play really high notes. So I used to watch them warming up, and what they would do is they would play long, low tones. And that would relax their embouchures, and then they would be able to play double and triple Cs. It's sort of the same concept.
Yeah, one thing, Alan. You started off the lesson with the Adler system, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the illusion of the single stroke roll. The seesaw method, AKA, whatever that means.
Yeah, this push, I call it push and pull. You know, I mean, you know, it's a different method now, but it's down up. As one goes down, the other one goes up.
Right, that's the seesaw.
Yeah.
And it's very rigid, tense.
Yes.
And there's a lot of.
It's tense in both directions.
Right, and it's wasting a lot of energy.
Yes.
Now, these gentlemen do a lot of vamping like Joe did, and they were actually dissecting, for example, the single stroke roll.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if they were doing eighth note vamps, what does the eighth note vamp have to do with the 16th notes or with the single strokes? It's in different places. There you go.
This is what Joe calls a vamp, which is what I'm talking about. Is the continuous motion when we're doing it up here. When you bring it down here, and this is the continuous motion. This is what I call a stage 2. So you can have one stroke where you're not continuous, right? Now, if I double up, I cut the time in half that I have to go up and down. So I got to move the stick up and down faster. So now it becomes continuous because of the accelerated speed. Separated, continuous. So we do a lot of practicing working on these vamps. Singles, vamp. Singles, vamps. So Matt's question was, why do we do that? Well, it's 2 reasons. The first reason is we work on one hand at a time so that the other gets the rest. Remember I told you that your muscles work, they develop tension, they build up tension, and they need to rest. Well, I find that when I work on one hand intensely and let the other hand rest, and then I switch to the other hand is really ready to do it. And the other hand that just got wiped out can recuperate. So I can do a lot of practicing that way. alternating and resting one hand and working the other, right? You know. Now the other thing is, if I could do this with one hand, right, and I could do this with the other hand, what happens if I use both hands at the same time? Well, that's great, but so what? But if I offset them by one stroke, now I have a single stroke roll. So when I'm doing this, I'm practicing my single stroke roll. Or I'm developing my ability to play a single stroke roll for an enduring period of time. So when you take a look at a stick control book, what happens is that if you work on 5, 6, and 7, you do these vamps, then you go to the next section. Well, not the next section, the triplet section. There's eighth notes of triplets. I skipped that. I like to go to the 16ths because it's a duple. And he starts doing stuff like this. But what is that? Now, isn't that the vamping we were doing, except now he's doing it with two hands? You know, so working the vamping in 5, 6, and 7 actually helps your singles and gets you ready to do page 10 when you have to do singles at 16ths instead of doing, you know. So they have two concepts going on. So I have singles, and then you do the same thing with doubles. And the paradiddle, which is the next thing that George does in stick control, is a combination of the two. It's really switching from single strokes to double strokes. It's a hybrid rudiment, right? Well, almost all rudiments are hybrid. There's only 3 rudiments. Right. Yeah, there's the single strokes, there's double strokes, there's flams. Everything else is a hybrid.
Combination of
those 3.
Definition of hybrid.
Yeah. Listen, I need to take a break. I hate to do this to you, but I need to take a bio break. And I'll be right back.
All right, I'll talk
yeah, talk to these guys. Why don't you get some questions from them? Because that's the material that I wanted to present. I can demonstrate things if you want me to demonstrate. I can answer questions about the science.
You'll play a little bit there.
If you want me to play, I'll play a little bit. But right now, I need to.
Okay.
I need to take care of my bio.
Ed, Romero. Come on, let's throw the questions out here. I mean, we're going to talk about, when he comes back, we're going to talk about tension. We're going to talk about accenting, unnecessary movement, tension again, the Adler system, which he demonstrated. Tom, you're in. All right, Tom. What's very hard to hear me, Ed? Is it hard to hear me? Sorry, I don't have the other mic. I have a different mic. I'll shout something. If I shout, is that better for you? You hear me? Alan is putting together the concept of what occurs with the drumstick. Just a second, Tom. With the laws of physics. You see, the laws of physics are there. You can't change them. If you fight them, you go nowhere. You go with them, you go where you're supposed to go. And Tom, that pad is, it's made by Off-World Percussion. It's one of their, the Invader drum pad, which I use and Alan uses. And that's one I gave him that Off-World Percussion sent me. I don't know the name of the pad, but I want some questions in here. Okay, you have what, the Invader? Does everybody understand about the tension, about the circular momentum, the rotation of the stick? You want to learn how to breathe. Well, okay, I'll bring that to Alan's attention when he comes back. Doug. Well, I don't think it's the molar mesh technique, Tom. As far as the circular momentum, the motion, yeah, it will come more from the molar. But you know, the term molar gets very confused in this mix. We're not talking. The stick heights actually come from, and he'll explain it to you, the brilliant George Lawrence Stone. Okay, the physics of it are similar. It's okay. Everybody see this? I have to yell out the questions because there are people viewing that are not in the chat room. And, the physics, yes, are similar. But the end result is you're going to hit the drum with a minimal amount of effort. Or if you have to use the energy, he's talking about the different energy levels or muscle mass. Okay? I'm going to ask Tom, one of the gentlemen, wants you to demonstrate the molar system in relationship to the physics. That kind of demonstrates, like he's talking about the downstroke, the tap.
Oh, very good. No, excellent. Molar is Tai Chi.
Well,
yes, and I will explain it exactly. Yes.
One more question in the mix that you could handle. Romero from Portugal, he wants to know about breathing, and he calls this is not Tai Chi drumming, but we just labeled it that way. Breathing inside of a motion is what you're talking about, Romero.
Yes, I do. I do breathing exercise while I'm practicing, especially when I'm doing endurance exercises. I find that I need to do to keep my energy going and to stay relaxed. I do some very slow, deep breathing, not in time, but just slow, relaxed breathing helps me, helps my endurance and stay relaxed. Oh. Well, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I do breathing exercises during the practicing, especially when I get to the higher accelerandos of the vamping. It helps me to breathe in order to stay relaxed and to keep oxygen flowing. Part of the problem in athletics is when you don't breathe properly, you deprive your muscles of oxygen. And so they run out of energy quicker. So yes, I find that breathing is an important part of what I'm doing, especially when I'm starting to develop the tension. It's a tool for me to mitigate the tension if I do some breathing exercises.
We have one more question that's associated with everything.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to the molar question. That's the one I want to answer.
That's the next one. Could it be associated with the speed, the momentum? That's from Gary from Australia. He wants to know, what is the method on the snare for minimizing, energy to gain speed? And we're going to talk about the molar and the unnecessary movement.
Well, okay.
And the circular momentum.
No, let me explain to you, molar. What they do with Tai Chi is they're transferring momentum through their body to the opponent. They maintain the center of their balance on the ground, and they use the momentum that by pushing with their feet on the ground, and they transfer the energy through various fulcrums. Every joint on our body is a fulcrum, just like our wrists, so they transfer it from the ankles to the knees, to the hips, to the spine, to the shoulders, to the arms, and to the opponent. This transfer of momentum energy. Not accelerated energy, but just the momentum, the power, the pushing power. And so they don't strike the enemy because they're not moving fast enough. The object is to find the enemy's center or get him off his center and use this momentum to push him off center and destroy his attack. Okay? So the thing you need to know about this is that muscle tension attenuates momentum energy. So when you use your own muscle tension to create more energy, that tension prevents the transfer of momentum energy through your muscles. So you get less momentum, but you get more kinetics. your joints also. If your joints are not relaxed, it's like a door that shuts down. The momentum will not pass the joint unless the joint is relaxed. So the muscles slow it down, and the joints will cease it if there's any tension. If it's not so, they must, while they're transferring this momentum through their joint system by rotation. They're not pushing. They're just taking it and they're rotating here, creating a motion up here, and they're taking this. Everything is a rotation until the strike. And the shoulders rotating, the elbows rotating, the wrist rotates, the hip rotates, all to transfer this momentum. Now, this is exactly what we do with molar. And I'm going to explain it to you. It's the same thing. We're transferring momentum energy from other fulcrums to the stick. There's 3 fulcrums that we're using. We have a shoulder fulcrum, we have an elbow fulcrum, and we have a wrist fulcrum. And it's a combination of these 3 working together, transferring energy from one to the other in a relaxed manner that gives you the power of the whip or the molar, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same to me. All right. But this, and I was explaining to you earlier about the fact that there's 2 kinds of rotational energy. Right? You can have it all on one side, and it emphasizes the momentum, because it creates a lot of mass inertia, which takes it's like a train. It takes more power to get it moving, and it takes more power to stop it. But it takes a lot of power to get it moving fast, so it's but the power is in the momentum, not in the speed. Then the other one is if you center it, you favor the speed, and you don't develop as much momentum out of it, right? So there's 2 different kinds of turn. One favors momentum, and one favors acceleration, right? We're using both. It's really clever what happens. Not that we even understand. I never understood what it was until now, but it's very clever. This is a momentum motion because all of the weight's on one side. The sort of pivot, the fulcrum is your shoulder, and you're turning, a 45 or 90 degree arc to begin with. That's where it starts. Now that motion and the mass of this part of the body is creating momentum from that motion. You doesn't have to move fast, but whatever weight there is at whatever speed you move it creates a momentum. Okay. And the kind of momentum it is momentum favorable because of the way the weight is distributed in the turn. That transfers it to the elbow. Now the elbow is also rotating on the elbow fulcrum or pivot. That is also a momentum favoring kind of rotation because, again, all of the weight is on one side of the rotation. Doesn't have to move fast to generate a lot of energy, but you can't. It doesn't favor kinetic acceleration. It favors slow momentum. So you have momentum going from this fulcrum and this kind of rotation, the momentum kind of rotation, into your elbow, which is another fulcrum, which is another multiplies that and gives it another momentum boost, momentum kind of rotation, which then goes to your wrist, which is the accelerated motion, where you're going to balance it. So this favors acceleration. So you're transferring momentum into momentum, and then translating that momentum energy into accelerated energy. And the reason the stick is an accelerator, simply because the further away you get out, the faster the stick has to move the bead. So if I move an inch here, I got to move 3 or 4 inches out here, which means I got to go 3 or 4 times faster at the tip of the bead. So whatever speed that I'm moving my wrist at is being accelerated by the rotation of the stick itself. So this momentum energy that's being developed by these momentum generating rotations, fulcrums, from one to the other, when it transfers it to the hand and the stick translates that momentum into kinetic energy or accelerated energy. And that speeds the stick up and creates the impact power. Whew. I never knew that until I studied Tai Chi.
Okay, Tom, does that answer your question? And he kind of answered it after the fact that you posted that question. And Tom says, well, since momentum is mass velocity, then Newton's second law says that the rate of change of that velocity, acceleration, of course, comes into play. And I believe he just covered that whole thing, Tom.
Yeah, right. We're taking the momentum.
Mass times velocity.
Right. And then we're bringing it in to velocity times mass. We're taking that mass and then we're adding velocity to it in our hand.
You see, I have, everybody has a little different approach. And what I think here is going on is a lot of people get confused what is happening and labeling it as something that it's not.
Before we do it before anything else, let me just do it so you can see what
we'll
it.
do it.
So I just explained it. So this is that whole thing happens in a split second. This is what it looks like.
Let me get a different view of you. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, this is what it looks like. I just took about 20 minutes to tell you what that was.
Yeah.
This is it. That's it. But I was explaining to what was happening. What happens is that the energy is going right through my arm, and then the stick is taking that momentum and turning it into an accelerated kinetic energy.
Absolutely. And what happened, if you remember, Mr. Saxon, he was given a kind of orientation, I guess, not an orientation, but some he made a video about the prevention of injury, and what you just demonstrated through your whole arm and the whole flow of that stroke was the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist were all working together. Nothing prevented that from happening. And that's where a lot of guys become injured if they don't allow that to occur. Now, you refer to, I guess, the shoulder and the elbow and the wrist as what, joints or hinges?
Yeah, they're joints, they're hinges, and fulcrums, whatever you want to, axis of rotation, whatever you want to call them.
Right, I refer to, I just wanted to make it clear, I refer to it as the levers, or levers, whatever. Yeah. And it's the same thing, when one fights something else,
it's semantics.
It's not going to happen. And that's when I just made the statement when Alan was not present, and let me make it again. When you fight the laws of gravity, or the laws of physics, you're going to lose. It's not going to happen. You need to go with the flow. Now, it seemed that Alan just did a whip with that right hand, and he got a lot of speed from all the muscle momentum. Tom, what's the word? Lever or lever?
Lever, I guess.
Lever, I guess. I guess that would be the word. I mean, they're the intertwining wheels that rotate in unison to come to an end to make something work.
It doesn't matter what you call it. It's the concept that's important.
Oh, yes, the concept is correct. The concept is important. I need to speak louder on this one because they can't hear me.
Okay.
But anyway.
I hear you great.
Al, stop being a comedian. Okay. Now, Alan's going to do a little demonstration here on how to obtain accents at a low level, you know, or a high level. And he's going to do a demonstration on that.
All right. So okay. So what I've come to, I used to practice accents, and it even says so in the Accents and Rebound book. It says, practice the accents harder than you would in playing when you're practicing. So I used to practice the accents as hard as I could do it, you know? And so I'm working much harder than I need to. You should be able to play accents soft or medium or loud or any dynamic level you want to, because it's not that you're playing a loud note and a soft note. You're playing a louder note and a softer note. It's a relationship between the loud sound and the soft sound. That could be a large relationship. It could be a small relationship. Both relationships could be a high volume. Both relationships could be low volume. I mean, there's a lot of different choices there. So I started practicing, trying not to use any tension in throwing the accent. In other words, to keep my hand as relaxed during the accent as when I'm not accenting. And the energy should be coming from the motion of the arm, flowing through my wrist. And if I'm doing it correctly and I'm not using any tension, all that momentum will pass through my wrist and cause the accent without me having to do anything with my hand. it's an additional motion that I'm adding to what my wrist is already doing. So I don't look, Moeller. First of all, I don't teach Moeller. I never studied Moeller. But I think it's the same whip. Ultimately, it's semantics what we're talking about. But a lot of the Moeller is taught in 3 different positions. You get a tap, an up, and then a down. A tap, an up, and a down. Those are 3 things. I don't look at it that way. The whip is one motion. It should not be broken into 3 different things. And you don't attach the whip to a specific stroke, because if the tempo changes, you have less time to work with, So I should be able to whip on any stroke I want to and not affect the vamping with a continuous motion that's going on and not using any pressure for the accent. So there's no hand pressure at all. I'm trying to keep my hand as open as possible and show you. It's just the speed of this. It's just the speed of this stick, and I'm allowing, because I'm relaxed, I'm allowing the energy to flow through my hand. Now, because I'm relaxed, I can choose how much energy I want in the accent. And how much energy, here's a big half stroke. I have to play a bigger accent to make it relatively bigger than a half stroke, but these are not ghost notes, these are tap strokes, these are half strokes. And I'm taking responsibility, I don't use my fingers to bounce with at these tempos. Why? I need the fingers later. Down here, I have to start using my fingers, but why should I don't want to just let it bounce. I mean, it's very uneven. Whoops. See that circle?
Well, Tom, he was demonstrated for everyone else's benefit who didn't understand the whole concept, and not the 3 steps, but for your benefit and for their benefit, he covered it all.
So this is continuously going on, and also because I'm not using any tension and I'm staying relaxed through the accent does not affect the sound of the taps in between. I'm not getting a degrading sound, because if I rely totally on bounce, the physics mean that each bounce is going to get softer. So I need to give it energy from I need to use my wrists until I get so fast that it becomes an endurance problem, because the muscle group is so big and I'm playing so fast that I'm losing endurance. So then I want to decrease my muscle group so that I can continue to play that fast. So I'm going to go to fingers at that point. And then eventually I have to bounce, but that's not, there's not any one way to do it. It depends on how fast I'm playing. If I'm playing a medium tempo, I can use my wrists, and I will, because there's more control, there's more power, there's more consistency in the sound. At certain tempos, my wrist can't work that quickly for that long, so then I'm going to have to add my fingers. So I'm always constantly negotiating between using arms if I want more power, or if I want to use my fingers if I want to use less power.
We have a question from Tom.
Yeah.
And that's a really good question, Tom. That question, a lot of drummers have that habit. And last night, Alan and I had a big discussion on this. And Tom's question is, how do you stop the stick from moving around or flying around in the right hand?
Really simple.
Okay, demonstrate it, Alan.
You follow the stick. If you're with the stick, you're not going to lose it, because you're where the stick is. If you're losing the stick, it's because your hand's going in one direction and the stick is going in another direction. And so you need to use a lot of tension in order to maintain control over it. So if you learn to move in the direction of the stick, you won't have to use so much tension to maintain control of the stick, because what you're doing, it's like think about a basketball player. I hate to use this again, but
You're not playing no basketball here.
no, but when a basketball player, when he's doing cross court and he's dribbling the ball, he's not throwing it from here and waiting for it to come back. He's following that ball all the way down because he doesn't want to lose control of it. Right? Now, he has to let go before it hits the floor because that's the rules of the game. We don't have to apply that rule in our game. We get to maintain control through the whole stroke. But the only way to maintain control over the ball or maintain control over the stroke is to be one with the ball or be one with the stick or be moving in the same direction from the same axis point, from the same balance point.
Tom, that's great that you made that statement, because when Alan and I first discussed this, yes, I became the stick. And no, I'm not a grasshopper. But you're right. Be the stick.
That's right.
Absolutely correct, Tom. Very good. Now, we're going to close it up in a few minutes. What I like to do is give Alan a little time here to play. But before he plays, and he's going to do something, I think perhaps from one of his DVDs, which is called Out of the Box. Now, for those...
Well, that's actually a CD. Yeah.
Or a CD, and you have a DVD that you're working with Billy Martin, and it's in progress.
Well, I don't know when that's going to get done, but there's one out now we did in 2009.
Which one is that?
Life on Drums.
There you go, the Life on Drums, which I have someplace, and I'm sorry I can't find it.
Yeah, and I don't have a copy to show it to you.
You want to give them a
You can go. I tell you, yeah. If you go to Amulet Records, which is Billy's label, and the film company is Bengali Films. You can order my CD or any of Billy's CDs or the DVD that we made together a couple of years ago.
Can you give them just a little bit of explanation of what you mean? A lot of guys hear that term, out of the box.
Out of the box?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Oh my! Well, that's really what the basis of my concept was. I was a freelance drummer. My whole life, I wasn't a soloist. I was a rhythm section player, you know, and I liked that.
You were always in the box.
I was always in the box, you know, and that was it. There was a way of playing. There's a cultural way of playing certain kinds of music, and there was a requirement when you're reading charts to do certain things certain ways for the other players, whatever. You know, the drums have a role. You know, I think everybody understands. If you don't understand what your role is in the band, I think you're in trouble. But if you want to work and you want to be successful, you have to fulfill your role within the unit. Every instrument has a role to play. The bass has a role, and the piano player has a role, and the drummer has a role.
And doing that in the box gave you that freedom just to be creative, and whatever occurs, and whatever you hear at the moment.
Yeah, well,
I was
you know,
here that day, Alan, that you did the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but the whole idea, you know, now I'm approaching drums differently than I used to. I mean, I stopped playing professionally. How long ago? Sure. Oh, it's about almost 18, 19 years. I stopped playing professionally, and I even stopped practicing for about 5 or 6 of those years. I tried to continue to practice after I stopped playing professionally. But it got boring, and there was no reason for me to do it. I wasn't using it, so I stopped.
Okay,
And went to,
we got one more question before you do something and play something out of the box.
No, I didn't finish explaining.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah. So when I decided to play drums again, I didn't want to go back as a freelancer and work in the business and fulfill a drummer's role. I wanted to approach the drums as a non-rhythm section instrument, an instrument that has the same role a trumpet player would have, or you know, a melody instrument would have, and approach it that way, as a solo melody instrument. And so I call it out of the box because to me that means that I'm playing not like a drummer. I'm out of the box. I'm not playing the drums like you're taught how to play the drums or about how drummers usually play the drums. So it's different, and it's out of the box.
Okay, Ed, the foot technique, I mean, we explained this last time or a few times ago in the lessons, and I'm going to get a a different camera to show you the different foot techniques. You know, we talked about the heel up, the slide, and Alan uses whatever he has to use in order to make it work.
Well, if you can get a camera back here, I can show you. I mean, you know,
I can't get it.
there's three things I do on the pedal that's most common. First of all, I have a terrible foot. I have to, you know, I don't have a great foot. I don't think you need a great foot, you know, to play the drums. I mean, when I learned to play the drums, if you're fulfilling your in-the-box role, you don't need a fabulous foot if you're not doing it as a solo thing. So I never really worked a lot with my feet. I worked a lot of coordination, but I never worked a lot of technique, or 2 feet technique, that kind of thing. But there's certain things that I think everybody winds up doing, and one is keeping your foot flat on the pedal. Is the first thing I learned, because I was playing jazz. So I found a lot of jazz players, maybe not today, but in the old days, most of it, and Joe Morello played this way. He kept his foot flat on the footboard and rotated from his ankle, just like he would be rotating from his wrist with his hand. He'd rotate from his ankle and keep his foot flat. And he just had that much natural speed just working the pedal. It was amazing. He used the Speed King, is what he used. And then when I got into playing rock and roll, you needed more power, so I started lifting my heel off the plate and putting some of my thigh in. So it was pressing down from the thigh. So one way is you're just playing from in here. You know, the other way is to get your heel up, and then you can slam with your toe. You can't see it. I mean, then I can slam with my toe and use the weight and mass of my thigh. I can play loud that way. You know, if I want to play soft, I'll keep my foot flat. If I'm going to play loud, I'm going to raise my heel up and add my thigh to it. And then there's the double stroke, which is the flip thing, the toe flat, where I hit the pedal with my toe and then slam it with the bottom of my foot. You can get a pretty good speed that way. I don't have a lot of control, but that's it slower. But if I was more used to this pedal, I used to use a speaky. You know, you get those double stroke things that way. It's easier to do on a 20-inch bass drum with a tight head because you get more rebound off the pedals. So you really have to work that a lot to do it on a 22-inch, because you got to use your foot more. You don't get as much rebound.
Okay, does that help you out? We will get into this in future lessons in greater detail. But I think that basic demonstration of what he did should help you out. Okay. Ed, I need a video. Okay, we're going to, if there's any questions, now's the time to ask. If not, we're going to have Alan just play out of the box, and for however long he wants to play. And that's maybe sometimes not a good thing to say, because I go outside and have a carton of cigarettes, he'll still be playing. All right.
You got another question?
Wait a minute. In Tommy Igo's DVD, Great Hands for a Lifetime, he says we need to make more micro adjustments, especially when you feel the grip losing control. Well, we're not going to talk about that one, Gary.
Yeah, I'll talk about it.
Well, you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm not Tommy Igo.
Okay.
I didn't study with him. I didn't study with his father, who was a friend of mine, by the way. It was very dear to me, but I didn't study with that method, and I don't find it true for what I do. And that doesn't mean that Tommy's wrong. Tommy comes from a different school. I never did any field drumming. I come from the classical school, not from the marching school of playing. So my answer to that is, this is what I do. If you like what Tommy does and it works for you, then do what Tommy does. You know, or it's really just a matter of what is it that works for you. That's what's important, not who's right and who's wrong.
All right, any more questions, gentlemen, before we wrap it up and have Alan do a solo? Gary, Doug, Ramiro, Tom, All right. What?
Hmm. What do you want to hear? You want to fly me to the moon?
No, I want to hear a polka.
Okay. Good.
All right, that was just a little bit. And yeah, Tom, that's what it's all about, is the physics. That's how you obtain what you do. All right, gentlemen, we're going to sign off now. And I'd like to thank Herman for taking time out to come here and explain to us what does occur with the drumstick when it's being played. Also, he is, I'm fortunate enough to have him as a friend. And he will come back, and he will do a few more lessons. And I just need some more questions, gentlemen. Don't be so meek. Throw them out here. You have somebody who's has a tremendous amount of experience.
Give me a question that'll send me off to do some research, so I can learn something new. Please.
Okay.
Ask me a good question.
Gary, Ed, Tom, Doug, thank you, gentlemen. And Romero left before I could say goodnight, because he's probably tired. It's probably 10 o'clock at night at his house. He's from Portugal. All right, gentlemen. You guys have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.